Welcome back to Reviving Goolricks. Please join me as we continue our visit with Danae Peckler of the Historic Fredericksburg Foundation at the Lewis store in downtown Fredericksburg. When we last saw Danae, she was giving us a little more information about the history of Goolricks from the 1800s.
By 1813, at least, we know it's turned into partially a tailor shop, and with a residence above, which was very typical. So it's been associated with various merchants throughout and over time. I will say that the market report really focuses on how, again, the past is physically reflected by the building. So we have a series of fires actually that impact the building. I believe that after 1807, the next one at least doesn't last until 1897. But at that time, it's so severe it takes out all of the stock of what was Goolrick's Pharmacy at the time. Luckily, at that point in 1897, it had just transferred. Actually, I think the fire happened months after William Barber Goolrick transferred ownership of his business to his son.
Okay.
Yes, Keating Nelson Goolrick, often referred to as K. Nelson. So unfortunately wiped him out, but they seem to have had multiple insurance policies and got the business started back up again. So it's amazing, actually. I think there were at least 2 more fires in the time of the building. There's a couple of newspaper articles that detail some of those. Eventually, I guess the building really is a testament to resilience because it does hold up. I mean, it's a very solid construction, and we certainly can see, I think there's evidence of charred materials that were still sturdy enough to reuse. And we know that our forefathers, or predecessors at least, were very good at recycling, and they never put anything to waste. So it's nice to see that a historic building really does have kind of a chronology, and events, and reflects that in the physical fabric. I will say in 1908, K. Nelson Goolrick ends up adding on to the building. It seems as though he was renting out a portion of it as well. So he had his drugstore, which we all know, and of course was adding a list of wares to sale, which I know we can see from some of the advertisements, the whole slew of things that they were offering to help people. But he was renting out, it looks like, to a hat store, and there was some other people were renting the space in between then. So it was always a mixed use, if we could say, over time. In 1927, though, this is after K. Nelson has passed away, and actually he passed away, unfortunately, without a will. It was very unexpected when he died fairly young. I think it was around the age of 47. And he didn't have a will, so the property actually stays in ownership of his siblings. He also did not marry or have any children, so it goes back to his mother and his siblings. And his sister, Nora, who married Dr. Lacey, actually purchased a half interest in the building and maintained the business as Goolrick's, so the name is staying there, and it's certainly persistent in the community, like I said, for such a long time. In 1927, the Goolricks actually reinvest in the building to do what we would call a reskinning. They kind of change up the facade just to give it a new, fresh look. And you can imagine that an 1808 dwelling, we have a few examples of some of those along the way, just would have had, the standard 2 to 3 windows at the top, in kind of what would have been an early colonial look. But they hire Peck Heflin, a local contractor, very prolific, to really reskin the front. And so that's when we get the nice parapet that comes along the flat parapet wall on the top, and then that beautiful Palladian window that marks the facade of the building. It was the fashionable of the day, but the classics in and of themselves, they never go out of style. And America's love affair with everything classical, Greek, Roman, these things still stick around in our architecture today. I mean, we still see the columns of the things that are here. So there are some people that say that classicism is actually part of the American spirit, that it's just a definer because we look back to the ideals of the Greeks and the Romans, and so that architecture really does, it's had a lasting impact. So Peck Heflin did a great job smoothing up the facade and giving it that look, which is what people will recognize now. And I guess shortly afterwards, there was the insert of the concrete floor. From what we can tell, just by building technology is kind of the way that sometimes we read a building as well. So we've got tax records that can show improvements, and then we've got newspaper records that might talk about something new going in. But really, we know concrete doesn't come around until around the turn of the century. And combined with J.W. Masters' steel beam that we see going across, which of course they so kindly marked for us to know about. I love it when builders leave us a sign. We'll have like some guys that'll carve their names into bricks and things like this, which is really lovely, or paint their names on the wall. walls, and those little marks of graffiti that can help us understand who was involved in the work are pretty priceless. So it's nice that we've got J.W. Masters firmly on that steel beam, but again, a later intervention that kind of reflects a certain point in time, because we know that wouldn't have been possible in earlier construction. So J.W. Masters, actually, he was born just before the Civil War in Stafford County, and then he marries a lady from town and moves in. And I guess he started his business in selling lumber ties, railroad ties, and lumber, and he ends up developing kind of a builder supply business that's very successful. And he's not actually the one building, but he is certainly the one supplying the builders and the contractors here locally. So a lot of people may recall his business and the fact that it was located at 601 Caroline, at least his shop was. That's now where we have the Executive Plaza, if I was to give it its correct name, as opposed to its locally known name. That's right, thank you. And he also had a planing mill and an office that actually was located at the corner of Prince Edward and Wolf Street, which is now a parking lot. So the business of J.W. Masters isn't really around anymore tangibly to reflect his success, but certainly the bits and pieces in the buildings and the other architectural legacy that he left is here for us to analyze. But yeah, so you've got that little fragment, and then I think there's some other graffiti throughout the building that is still, being deciphered, and hopefully connecting with both census records and city directories, we can determine maybe who left their mark and for what way they can be immortalized in the physical legacy that is this great, wonderful buildings.
A feature of the building that is a very prominent character of the building is that sign. And it's really a big part of how we identify Goolricks today is with that sign. What could you tell us about the history of that and maybe any other features of the building itself?
Excellent question. Yes, actually, I think it was James Gerald who pointed out that HFFI gave Goolricks an award actually for the preservation of that great sign. You don't see as much neon around town as we'd all like it to be, right?
Well, where's the neon going?
Based on historic photographs of the building and also some newspaper articles, we actually think the sign's probably from around the 1930s. Historic research is an art, not a science to a certain extent, so hopefully we'll land on it one day and there'll be some record popped up. But yeah, it's really an iconic sign, and the power again of architecture to affect people's memories and spaces. There is a company that was actually started by Jack Dowling, and I believe it was J.E. Dowling Company is the name of it, who had claimed, at least in the late 1930s when they set up shop here in Fredericksburg, that they had done about 90% of the neon work here in town. So it's very probable that connection is there. But at least we know in 1938 that the Pitts theater next door had a giant neon sign added as well. So it was a part of a larger trend, but it's one of the last survivors. So go Goolricks, right? Keep it going by all means. But yeah, the sign is just one reflection. From the 30s at least, we know the flood also had a big impact on the building. There's some great images. One of 1942, of course, with the water coming up. Based on those historic photographs and other records, historic building permits only survived for a short period here in our town. But they detail the fact that the gable roof that would have been original probably to 1808, we believe, was removed around 1952. And also Bernard Klein, who was a local contractor and builder. He did some other storefronts downtown, also a lot of residences, and then the medical arts building that's actually across from the old hospital. There's a couple of old hospitals, but anyway, the first Mary Washington Hospital there on Fall Hill Avenue. Bernard Klein is on record as doing the cool storefront that we see that's got the sleek elements that read very 1958. So now we have an exact date on that, which is kind of cool. But talking about the reskinning and the trend of kind of looking posh, Goolricks was very good at that. We have a couple of storefronts that come before that are revealed in pictures as well. So it's got an evolution. It keeps evolving, but thanks to Gerald Properties, then it'll hopefully will stick around and evolve for a few more centuries. Will be wonderful. A couple other interesting architectural features, I will say. I was really impressed when I was in the basement and we were looking around at the very front of the building, right along Caroline. There is, immersed in the masonry, there's kind of an opening that's been filled in, but a section of it has a couple of sandstone pieces that are actually carved, one on one side, that made me think and suspect it is the probable bulkhead. And what a bulkhead is an entry to the basement level that a lot of commercial buildings on a prominent street would have, so that people could unload merchandise and go down into the basement for storage. Or it was also a possible place to store things that were dirty that maybe you didn't want in your store upstairs. Coal, I think Goolrick's had paints and other things like this that were probably not something that would be right there next to your soda. But the bulkhead and that sandstone piece are probably antebellum. I mean, the way that it looked where it was cut out, that's something that we did way back when the manpower and the time and attention, we were working with what we had, and sandstone was a local resource. So that's another great architectural feature. And the ghost line as well. We call it a ghost whenever there's something that you see a trace of that's no longer present. And the gable roof that was removed in 52, of course, from the other side of the street, you get a much better view of that ghost line along the adjoining building.
Of course, we all associate the name Goolrick's with Goolrick's Pharmacy, but the Goolrick's family has not been affiliated with the business or the building for some time. Are you able to give us a little bit of information about the people that have run Goolrick's?
Yeah, actually, that was one of the more unique parts. This building had a life for 100 years before it became associated with the Goolrick's, but it's the lasting power that this great pharmacy and soda shop has had on our community, clearly. And it's really a legacy business. And actually, William Barber Goolrick was born in 1847. He actually did serve in the Civil War, and then he came back, and in 1869, he partnered with Dr. C.A. Jones. But there were other doctors in the family as well. We've always needed physicians. So evidently he started to study medicine and decided that it wasn't for him, but that making medicines was something he could do. So he partnered with C.A. Jones, and then he actually left and went to Philadelphia to work with a much more larger drug manufacturer, learned some skills. And in 1878, he comes back. And it's a big article in town that announces his return. And I think at that point, we've actually got some references to his location being in the current Goolrick's building. So as early as 1878, he's definitely setting up shop there and starting to sell medicines of a wide variety, which at that time were a wide variety, right? There are going to be lots of ways to treat ailments. But anyway, so William eventually passes the business on to his son, Keating Nelson Goolrick, or Nelson. That's in 1897, and then it persists in the family and other family members into the mid-20th century. So it's really got that lasting power, and I think it's also showing, again, the recognition of the name, the sign, and the other things that you just can't go changing it now. So don't mess up a good thing, you know. And I think what Gerald Properties is doing to try and really keep that memory alive and certainly reinvigorate it for the next generation is going to be really fun to watch. Yeah.
Well, it's the physical legacy and the gaps that you're filling with all the research that you've done is amazing. It's really helping us paint the full picture of the building that we've been able to take on and hopefully put in a position to last for another 100 years. So we really thank you for being a part of our journey and putting this building back together, creating this to be a landmark again, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Please follow us on all our socials to stay up to date with the latest happenings.